At 42, Claire Morgan had never called herself an artist. She had never studied painting, never dreamed of an exhibition, and never imagined earning money from a brush. She worked as a records clerk in a rehabilitation hospital, where her days were measured in patient numbers, unsigned forms, appointment codes, and files that had to reach the right department before someone noticed they were late. Painting entered her life because an elderly patient kept getting lost. His name was Arthur. Each afternoon, he left the memory care ward looking for a railway station that had closed more than 30 years earlier. Printed signs did not help him. Maps confused him. Instructions disappeared before the nurses finished giving them. So Claire painted him a picture. It was uneven, badly proportioned, and made with supplies borrowed from the children's therapy room. But when Arthur saw it, he stopped walking. For the first time that week, he recognized where he was supposed to go. Claire thought she had solved one small problem. She did not yet understand that the picture had exposed a future she had never known was available to her. Claire worked in a narrow office beside the admissions corridor. There were no windows, only steel shelves, 2 computer monitors, and a printer that made a grinding sound before every paper jam. Her job was to keep patient information complete and moving. Doctors needed test results. Therapists needed treatment histories. Families needed forms explained without being made to feel foolish. Claire was good at finding what other people had misplaced. A missing referral, an unsigned page, the one phone number buried inside years of records. Her supervisor, Martin Reeves, described her as dependable because Claire rarely created problems anyone else had to solve. She arrived prepared, stayed calm, corrected mistakes quietly. At the end of each day, she locked the filing cabinets and left no evidence that she had been overwhelmed. Her life outside work operated the same way. Rent paid, groceries bought, laundry completed, calls returned. Nothing dramatic was wrong, but months had begun to feel interchangeable. On her 42nd birthday, Claire's sister sent her a message asking what she wanted to do differently that year. Claire stared at the question for several minutes, then replied with a joke about sleeping more. The truth was that she could not think of an honest answer. She had spent years assuming purpose arrived early, announced itself clearly, and belonged to people who had always known what they wanted. By 42, she believed her own life had already declared its shape. Work, responsibility, small comforts, then more work. It was not an unhappy life. It simply felt decided. Arthur Bell had worked on the railway for most of his adult life. After a serious fall, he entered rehabilitation with a fractured hip and worsening dementia. His body was healing faster than his sense of place. The ward had signs showing bathrooms, treatment rooms, and dining areas. Each sign used large lettering and simple arrows. Arthur ignored them. He kept asking where to buy a ticket. Some days he became agitated when staff redirected him. Other days he stood at the end of the corridor looking embarrassed, as though everyone had discovered he no longer understood the rules. Claire first noticed Arthur while delivering a corrected medication record. He was beside the nurse's station, insisting that he would miss the evening train. A nurse spoke gently, but Arthur only became more distressed. Behind him, the wall displayed a photograph of the town's old railway station. Claire pointed towards it. "Was that your station?" Arthur turned. The photograph did not tell him where to go, but it held his attention. He stepped closer and began describing details no one had asked about. The clock above the entrance, the green benches, the porter's office, a flower bed his wife always complained was neglected. For several minutes, he knew exactly where he was. Not in the hospital, but inside a memory he could still navigate. Later, Claire asked the occupational therapist, Lena Shah, why the photograph had worked when the signs had failed. "Words ask him to interpret," Lena said. "Recognition asks less." But there was another problem. The photograph contained too much. Windows, people, tracks, advertisements, the station clock. Arthur recognized the world inside it, but but not the direction it was meant to give him. Claire began wondering whether the image needed to be simpler. Not a photograph of everything. One object, one color, one clear association. A few days later, Arthur wandered into the records corridor. He was searching for the dining room, but could not explain what he wanted. Claire walked him back to the ward. Above the dining room entrance was a white sign with black lettering. It looked obvious to Claire. To Arthur, it seemed to mean nothing. That evening, she stopped at a discount shop and bought a small paint set, 2 brushes, and thick paper. She felt ridiculous carrying them home. She had not painted since childhood. Her first attempt was a white cup beside a red plate. The proportions were wrong. The table tilted. The shadow looked like spilled ink. She nearly threw it away. Instead, she removed the background, made the cup larger, and added a thick blue border so the shape would stand apart from the wall. The following morning, Claire taped the picture beside the dining room entrance. When Arthur reached the corridor that afternoon, he slowed down. His hand loosened from the rail. He looked at the cup, then at the doorway. He said. The nurse beside him nodded. Arthur entered without asking again. The moment lasted less than a minute, but Claire noticed the absence of struggle. No repeated instruction, no embarrassment, no raised voice. It worked again the next day. Not perfectly, not every time, but often enough for the nurses to notice. A nurse asked Claire to paint a green armchair for the family room. Lena requested an image of parallel bars for the therapy area. Claire agreed because the requests were practical. She did not think of the pictures as art. They were tools. That made them feel safe. Within 3 weeks, 8 of Claire's paintings appeared around the ward. A yellow towel for the bathroom, a bowl of soup for the dining room, a garden bench for the courtyard, a pair of slippers for one patient's room. Claire painted after work at her kitchen table, using old newspapers to protect the surface. She learned by failing privately. Too much water weakened the colors. Too little made them heavy. Detailed backgrounds confused the central object. Faces were difficult, so she avoided them. She watched free painting demonstrations online and paused them constantly. Slowly, she began noticing color while waiting for the bus. Orange light inside a corner shop, violet shadows under parked cars, a narrow line of gold along wet pavement. For years, Claire had moved through the city by function: home, work, shop, hospital. Now the same streets seemed to contain information she had previously ignored. But the paintings were beginning to affect her work. She stayed up late correcting one image and entered the wrong date on a patient transfer record the next morning. Martin caught the mistake before it caused a delay. He closed the file and looked at her. "You're doing extra work for the ward, aren't you?" Claire expected praise. Instead, he reminded her that she already had a full-time role. If the signs were part of a hospital project, they needed approval. If they were not, they could not interfere with records. Martin was not cruel. That made his warning harder to dismiss. For the first time, Claire saw that usefulness did not remove responsibility. It created more of it. The dementia care coordinator heard about the images and asked Claire to attend a staff meeting. Claire assumed they wanted her to stop. Instead, photographs of the signs were spread across the conference table. The coordinator proposed a 6-week visual orientation pilot. Claire would work with nurses, therapists, and families to create a consistent set of images. There would be a small materials budget. Martin agreed on one condition: the project could not compromise her records work. Claire's first instinct was to refuse. "I'm not qualified to design clinical materials." The coordinator explained that generic commercial illustrations had already been tested. They looked polished, but they contained unfamiliar objects and unnecessary detail. Claire's images worked because they were based on the ward's actual rooms, routines, and patients. That was exactly what frightened her. Painting privately required no title. A formal project required accountability. What if an image misled someone? What if the hospital expected more than she could deliver? What if one accidental success became a responsibility she could not sustain? Claire asked for a day to think. Before she could answer, one of her existing pictures caused a problem. She had painted a red door to mark the quiet room. From nearby, it was clear. From the opposite end of the corridor, it resembled the fire exit sign. A patient followed it towards a restricted stairwell before a nurse stopped him. No one was injured, but the image was removed immediately. Claire stood in the corridor, holding the painting against her chest. Her good intentions had created confusion. For the rest of the day, she considered abandoning the project. The failure seemed to confirm everything she feared. She was untrained, out of her depth, playing with a problem that belonged to professionals. Then Lena showed her the incident notes. The failure was real, but so were the earlier improvements. The lesson was not that Claire should stop. It was that she could not work alone. The following morning, she accepted the pilot. The pilot forced Claire to replace instinct with method. She met with nurses to identify repeated moments of confusion. Families described objects patients still recognized from home. Lena explained visual processing difficulties. Martin helped Claire block 2 scheduled hours each week for the project, provided her records remained current. Claire created the first full set too quickly. The flowers were distracting. The backgrounds were crowded. One image looked clear at desk level, but disappeared against the wall from a wheelchair. Another used colors a patient could not distinguish easily. The team tested each picture and recorded reactions. Claire watched people misunderstand work she had spent hours making. She wanted to explain every decision. Instead, she took notes. She enlarged central objects, removed decorative details, used stronger contrast, tested images from different heights and distances. She changed the angle of a painted doorway after a patient mistook it for a cupboard. She learned that effectiveness mattered more than beauty. The workload was difficult. Some evenings, her kitchen remained covered in paints because she was too tired to clean. She stopped answering casual messages. Once, she fell asleep at the table while waiting for a layer to dry. Martin noticed her fatigue and warned that the hospital would pause the pilot if her record's accuracy slipped again. Claire reacted defensively. Then she realized he was protecting both the patients and the project. She built a schedule. No painting after midnight. No hospital work carried home without approval. 1 full evening each week with no project. She stopped treating exhaustion as evidence of commitment. Then Arthur's condition worsened. One afternoon, he walked past the painted cup without recognizing it. Claire followed him into the corridor, carrying the feeling that the entire project had failed. She began removing the picture. Lena stopped her. "His condition changed," she said. "That does not erase the days it helped." Claire had quietly begun measuring the value of her work by whether it could stop loss, but no painting could do that. The images could not restore memory. They could only offer orientation, comfort, or dignity while those moments remained possible. That distinction changed her. She stopped trying to create perfect solutions. She began creating useful invitations. A recognizable object, a familiar color, a small bridge between confusion and action. At the end of the pilot, the hospital reviewed the results. The numbers did not tell a miracle story. Patients still became lost. Some images worked better than others. Some stopped working as conditions progressed. But staff recorded fewer incidents of agitation near several key rooms. Families said the ward felt less clinical. The hospital approved a wider visual orientation program. Claire was invited to help develop it. This time, she did not begin by explaining what she lacked. She asked what the project required. The hospital funded a short course in therapeutic arts and dementia-friendly communication. Claire attended because the work had already given the learning somewhere to go. Several months later, a small community care center contacted the hospital after hearing about the pilot. They asked whether Claire could create 4 simple visual markers for one corridor. It was not a major contract. She spent 2 evenings trying to decide what to charge. The first amount felt too high. The second barely covered materials. Eventually, she sent a modest quote and expected them to refuse. They accepted. Claire bought better brushes, cleared one corner of her living room, created a basic invoice. She did not leave the hospital. She did not become a full-time artist. She completed one external project, then waited several weeks before another inquiry arrived. Her future was not suddenly secure. It was simply no longer closed. One afternoon, Claire returned to Arthur's ward carrying a revised set of signs. His bed was empty. He had been transferred to a long-term care home closer to his daughter. There was no farewell speech, only a small plastic bag on the nurse's desk containing belongings his family had left behind. Inside was Claire's first picture, the uneven white cup beside the red plate. Arthur's daughter had asked for the picture to be sent to his new room. Claire held it by its worn edges. The table still tilted. The shadow still looked like ink. But it had done what it was made to do. It had helped one man recognize where he was going. At 42, Claire had believed meaningful lives belonged to people who discovered their purpose early. Now she understood that some directions do not begin as dreams. They begin as needs, requests, problems no one has solved properly. Small work that matters before it looks impressive. You may not have missed your purpose. You may simply be searching for it in the past, when it is waiting inside something that needs your attention now. Notice what you keep improving. Notice what people trust you to solve. Notice the work that leaves you tired, but more awake. Claire's future did not begin when she finally felt ready. It began when she made one imperfect picture useful to someone else.